to see
Uh,
40 head of them running in a herd. Yeah.
What do you do if one, like, across the road, you just gotta sit and wait, huh?
Well, I almost hit one yesterday in the daylight, driving about 20 miles an hour.
Alright.
It was the straggler, last of the herd.
Does anybody want some pumpkin pie?
Anybody want pumpkin pie to take home?
You want these?
I'd take it home.
Let's
Are you-
take it all.
Karen, are you asking about right now or taking it home?
You can take it home.
Take it home.
Or eat it now, whichever you want.
I'd gladly take some home, but
You want to take some home? How many pieces you want?
just one's fine.
Are you sure?
And turn it over.
I mean, I don't want it to go waste.
just put all you want on there, he'll eat it.
It's there anyway. You could cut them slim if you gotta. Pumpkin might be some, girls might not be a good old place for it.
I don't know.
Eat spicy, you
Really?
know, a little stronger taste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Want to put your crackers, the future?
Yeah.
I'm looking for my phone. I don't know if I can get that whole thing out.
Honey, there's like Ziploc baggies down there. Just, no? Okay.
Thank you.
Sometimes we all need a break.
Except this water, I'll have to let go.
Are you cold, Virgil? Really?
Me
I'm
too.
I'm borderline sweating in here.
Cold.
Put my coat back on.
That's a little bit cool, I think.
Now you gave Linda an idea.
Okay, this is your hot.
What is it, 67 degrees in here?
71.
Scott,
Don't feel like it.
It don't feel like that.
Better go look. It should look
When
like
you
71.
stirred up to me, I got cold.
Yeah, it's 71. Yep.
It's a cold 71.
Must be dry.
sorry, I don't want to set no.
I keep mine at 70 pops.
Really?
And last night I was a little cool. So I just clicked it to 76.
It gets colder every year.
Does it?
Yeah.
Isn't that right, Wayne? Wayne, it gets colder every year.
Yes, it does.
You too?
When I was real sick there back in December, I had it up to 78 at one point.
You
So,
must have been sick.
Yeah.
You had it up to
yeah,
78.
I was burning everybody else out of the house. Yeah. I was hot, or I was really cold when I was sick. The shingles on top of the flu just about took me out. So,
I believe I heard the other day they was gonna pay for the shingle shot now.
are they?
I thought I heard that.
That was the worst pain I ever felt in my life.
And I've known some people that had shingles, but I didn't know them that they was bad as you had.
Yeah, some do and some don't.
My mom had them when she was in the nursing home.
Oh,
And some of them said most all of people that when they went to the nursing home would have them that would upset their nerve system or something. She had them up here and in her hair, but of course they didn't want them to get in her eyes. And she did.
yeah, mine was just right around my midsection. So sleeping or laying down or sitting was
Terrible.
awful.
You had to stand up or sit on your head.
Or I had to cover myself with ice. I had to sleep with ice. I had to sit down with ice. Yeah,
Huh.
yep. And about 3 hours in, when the ice was gone, I'd have to get up, in the middle of the night and
Redo.
redo it all. Yep. Then you wake up to a wet mess, of
Did-
course.
Well, I bet.
Yeah.
Did you feel cold then?
No. I got the flu right afterwards. So, just one of them lucky times.
I tried to have I just took a cold last week. I didn't come last week. And I thought I was gonna have a good one, but a couple of days and I got over it.
That's nice.
I think the counter needs to be wiped off.
Well, today is the 1-year anniversary of Bill Hoke's passing.
Oh,
So I thought when everybody got in here, I thought we'd try to call Velda and say hi.
they get a lot of snow there where she is.
I think so. I know they're at some kind of elevation.
I think she's pretty close to Colorado Springs.
Yeah, something like that. Got to stay in her house, so she was happy about that. Didn't have to leave the house. Okay. Bring up Velda's number here, see if we can catch her. All right, well, I was just
You got your phone in your hand?
I do.
Dial my number,
dial your number.
We just dialed another one.
Okay,
346.
Yep.
7276.
calling you.
I don't think you have it left yet.
I think I hear it.
Couldn't you hear it ringing? Yeah. I thought it was his phone.
I don't think it's working.
I had it in there.
Technology. Oh, it's great.
Maybe what I'm hearing is his. phone.
No, it is.
Yeah, see, I have it on speakerphone.
I
The
think what
person you're
I'm,
calling isn't accepting messages.
No.
Did you?
it's not in there. I don't
It's
think.
probably in your car or at home, Shirley.
Yeah. Why, that was Linda? No, I thought this was ringing.
Mine.
Josh's. Oh. You got to my. I want a phone that got a little leather pouch and a pretty little. You could let it hang on and hide it down inside the purse.
I bought a leather, whatever you call it, holder for Paul, because he's always fussing about having to hunt big for it. And he never would use it, and I happened to find it one day. I was in the desk, his desk, and well, he don't use this, so I stuck on my have pockets, and I have.
Yes.
He hates that, 'cause
Mine are
so I've
that
been
too.
using that, but the thing is, it's heavy leather. And
Around the
it
chair.
pulls it between that and the phone weight.
All right. I was telling everybody here that today is Bill Hoke's 1 year of passing. So I thought we'd try to call Velda real quick and say hi, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So I'll put her on speakerphone if she picks up here. See if I'll talk first and tell her that you're all here. She might call us back, you know.
You're not available now.
Okay, she might call us back, so we'll talk to her then. All right, well, we're at the end of John chapter 9. We are at verse 35. And this continues the story of the man born blind that Jesus has healed. And his story doesn't end at this chapter. He'll reappear, or the story itself will reappear again in the middle of chapter 10. This miracle caused quite a stir. The Pharisees just do not know what to do with Jesus because he claims to be God. They've already tried to throw him over a cliff for saying that. They've tried to stone him. They're going to try to stone him again. Eventually, they will crucify him.
It can't be, no, it's on over.
End of John 9.
Mark, Luke, John, and
Yep. 0 John, plain John 9, verse 35. And so they won't accept that he's God. They won't accept he's the Messiah. And so they keep trying to find a way to kill him. And this miracle is one that now they can't deny. It was done in the public. He himself, the man who was born blind, testifies to it. Everybody recognizes it was the man that was born blind. So it's one of these obvious facts that some people do not want to accept. Now, I'm thankful 2,000 years later, we've evolved beyond that, right? Nobody ignores obvious facts anymore, do they? Oh, no. So this is all theoretical. Now, of course, to be serious, people are people. People will still deny the evidence of their own eyes. They will deny the evidence of what is good, what is obvious, what is natural, what is plain. And they will substitute it for what they want to believe. And that's really the problem. I find in evangelism most of the time, I'm not dealing with somebody who doesn't know the facts, especially after I present them. It's somebody who doesn't want those facts. That's the difference. And sin has a way of keeping us entangled in falsehoods and wanting us to desire the things that are not of God. So let's see how this story continues, starting in verse 35. Would somebody read 35 and 35 through 38?
Jesus heard that they'd put him out. You have both seen him, and he is the one who's talking with you. And he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him.
All right. Thank you, Virgil. So this man, he's been healed, and he's been put out of the synagogue. And we all remember what that means, right? You're out of work, you're out of your family, you're out of the community. He's essentially been ostracized. And this man doesn't seem to be too concerned about that. What does he want to know? Who Jesus is. Keep in mind, the Pharisees and all these people, they hadn't done him any good. So when they threatened him to be thrown out of the synagogue, he's like, what good has the synagogue done me? But this man, Jesus, he made me see. So notice the Pharisees were pressuring the people and saying, if you claim Jesus is the Christ, we're going to put you out of the synagogue. that was another way they kept people scared and silent. And you see this with authority to this day. Doesn't matter what country you're talking about or what time you're talking about. The ruling authorities will use this kind of societal pressure to get people to believe and think the way they want to. The good news is, and I really mean this, the good news is history shows this does not work over time. It always fails over time. Eventually the truth becomes so obvious, so plain, that the emperor finally has no clothes, if you're familiar with that children's story. And so, even though the Pharisees are doing this, and they're pressuring the people, and in the short term, they are keeping some people from Jesus, in the long term, it's not going to make any difference. Jesus is still alive today. He's the most common name in the whole world. His book is the #1 bestseller. And may I ask you, where are the Pharisees? Gone. Gone. Exactly. So that's what happens with man-made things. All right. You really have to admire this guy because he's literally throwing away his entire old life. It's sort of a story of salvation, sort of a parallel of that. Throwing away his entire old life, and now he has this new life, worshiping Jesus, following Jesus. Now this next verse that Jesus speaks, verse 39, the Pharisees are going to overhear him. So the Pharisees are still around when this is happening. So somebody read 39 through 41.
And Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, so that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind. For those of the Pharisees who were with him heard these things and said to him, 'We are not blind too, are we?' Jesus said to them, 'If you were blind, you would have no sin. But since you say, we see, your sins remain.'"
Okay, thank you, Connie. If you took the first few words Jesus says in verse 39, I think you might get the wrong idea. Notice what he says. For judgment I came into this world. Now, if you read that by itself, what would you might think?
He come to judge everyone.
And that's it. Didn't come to save, didn't come to help, didn't come to heal, didn't come to feed, didn't come to do nothing but judge. Is that where the verse ends, though? No. It's just like Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. It's probably the most common quoted Bible verse by accident in our world. And the first three words of Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 is, do not judge. But Jesus speaks for another 98 words. But what part of that verse do they quote? Just the first three words. Well, all the same, if you just read these few words, you get this idea, wow, Jesus just came to make life miserable, just to judge us, just to divide us. That's not what he's saying at all. He's saying, so that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may become blind. Jesus likes these contrasts. You know, like the first will be last and the last will be first. And other phrases like that. He likes these contrasts. And that's because people usually have things turned upside down, don't they? And they've got this turned upside down. The Pharisees think they see it all. They think they know the law. They think they're perfect. They think they got it together. And Jesus is coming and saying, you don't know nothing. You don't have it together. You need God more than anyone. You're blind as a bat. So because people so often get things upside down is why I think Jesus likes these inversions. So this first part, so that those who do not see may see. Now in this miracle, it's a physical malady. The man is actually literally blind and Jesus makes him see. But there's a spiritual lesson here. Anybody here kind of describe what it means to suddenly spiritually see after you've been blind? What comes to mind?
Truth.
Okay, yeah. You can finally recognize what is true. That's good. Yeah. What else? After you've been blind and now you can spiritually see clearly, what does that mean? Like, describe that experience. We've all been there. It's hard to put it into words. I know. I'm making you think. After lunch.
I think it means that you understand some things
Yes.
that you either misunderstood or couldn't understand before.
Yes.
Because you see the reasoning and
I love that. You said understand the reasoning. For the first time, you sort of understand why things are the way they are. For example, when you understand that we live in a sinful world, a world that has been affected by sin, you understand why there's natural disasters and why there's death and why there's, these unexplained phenomena. Our world, after the fall of man, was cursed. Sin invaded it. And so suddenly you understand why things are the way they are. That's good. What else? Spiritually seeing after you've been blind. What was it like for you?
You have a feeling of like joy and peace.
Yeah, hope.
And hope.
Yeah.
That's a great way. I mean, it's things feel better.
For me, when I was 17, I had a really idyllic childhood, really good. Don't remember any abuse or trauma or extreme difficulty other than just, typical junior high stuff.
You didn't get whipped at all?
Yeah, but that was totally deserved. It wasn't abusive. But when I was 17, just to give you an idea, I had money in the bank, I had a fast car, I dated the homecoming queen of the high school. I had it all. And it felt empty. Because after you've been to a few fancy restaurants, after you've won a couple of drag races, after you've, sort of peaked in a way, what else is there? What's the meaning of life? I mean, if women, food, and fun doesn't do it, I'm talking about a teenage boy here, what does do it? What does satisfy? And these are the questions I started to ask. And so when I finally saw that the meaning of life could only be had in God, that's what made me realize I really don't want to go into computers. I really want to go into ministry. So the very next day I decided to become a minister after I became a Christian. And that was derailed by stupid decisions I made over time, and it eventually all worked out. But the point is that I was blind and I saw, and what I saw was real purpose. There was a real meaning to life, and it had nothing to do with things. So that's kind of my experience. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Spiritually seeing? So this man is not just seeing physically, he's now seeing spiritually, because he says, Lord, I believe. He believes in Jesus. He knows almost nothing about him, but he knows one thing. Remember what he said earlier? I don't know who he is, but I know this much. I was blind, and now I see. I'm going to follow that guy. That makes a lot of sense. All right. And then the Pharisees are right there listening to this. And they say what? We are not blind too, are we?
Stupid.
Oh, Karen. That was funny.
Sometimes those two words mean the same thing.
Blind and stupid. Well, there's another debate. But the Pharisees at this point stupid almost be a kind word. They know better, and they're still denying Christ. So that's worse than stupid. That's just lying.
The worst part is they don't really know better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're,
That's good.
They
Yeah.
made up their rules and they're going by it, come hill or
yeah.
and they don't care what anybody else shows them or tells them or.
And think about that. They made up their own rules and they follow by them. Well, that would make life pretty easy, wouldn't it? If you're the one who could make up the rules.
Yeah.
My first rule would be we're going to have daytimers quality food every day all the time. Okay?
Getting it put into practice.
Right.
Difficult.
Since I literally contribute nothing the vast majority of the time, that would be a rule. It'd be easy for me to live by, but it would impose upon others. So,
So that's everything's like this.
yes, exactly. So they made up their own rules and then they lived by them. Well, that's not too hard. They made up the rules. But it turns out they really didn't make up the rules. God did, and they were falling way short. And then Jesus, who has been pretty blunt with the Pharisees, continues to be, and he says, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But since you say we see, your sin remains. So again, it's another one of these inversions. The first will be last, last will be first. And he's just letting them know, just like Barb said, they thought they knew better. But because they did, Jesus is like, you don't see anything. You don't have it together. And then you have curious Pharisees in the background like Nicodemus just trying to figure this out. Now, to be fair, if you've been raised a Pharisee and that's all you've ever known, how hard would it be to walk away from it? Very hard. I understand when somebody's been raised in a different faith or been raised in a denomination or whatever, and it's very hard to walk away from that because that's all you've known, especially if it was a positive experience. You know, if you had a happy time in another faith or another church, it's very hard to recognize there's things wrong with it. That's why it took me a while to walk away from my Pentecostal roots, and it took my mother half her life because she had mostly positive experiences in that world. And to come to realize that it was that the people weren't necessarily bad, but the beliefs were, that it was very hard to realize that, you know, good people can be wrong.
Well, that's why I have to be with Kate. You know, be careful sometimes of what I say, because, you know, I don't want her to take it.
Yeah. I think you have to preface it, you know, like, I'm not attacking you or the people in your church or your faith. I'm trying to help you understand what's true and what isn't. And good people can be wrong. That's one of the hardest things to understand about adulthood. Linda?
Well, I think another thing that makes it very hard to walk away from if you in family that believe different than you do, you don't want to go against your
Right.
family in most instances. Nowadays, I don't know if that's the same, but you don't want, you know you may be giving an awful lot.
Yeah. Yeah, some people will take it personally no matter how you put it.
Yeah.
And that's very hard. So I understand that. Connie?
Well, and I think some of these religions that have so many, you know, ceremonies and rules, and, you know, my daughter-in-law was raised in Catholicism. And although, you know, she did some reading and studying, and nothing quite fits the picture of what she thinks religion should be. So, you know, she's still struggling out there. But this is what, you know, there are things that you do, and you do certain things. And so when it came to my grandchildren, you know, they went along and did that not because she believed in it now, because she really doesn't, but it's just something you do. Like when a kid reaches a certain age, they go to kindergarten. Well, when they reach a certain age, you know, when they're still a baby, you know, they're baptized.
Yeah.
And when they reach a certain age, they do this. And, you know, both of my grandchildren were baptized Catholic, and the ceremony, and it was more it felt like more of a social thing, ceremony that you did, like, oh, this, you know, we have a new baby and this is what we do. Her mother was down at the front in the sanctuary lighting candles. I mean, it was her faith, and it meant something to her.
Right.
That it really didn't to Kelly, and of course, the kids, it didn't really mean anything to them.
Right. And that's actually the problem with religious ceremony, is it becomes just that. It becomes just a familial tradition. It doesn't really mean anything. And then, of course, you wonder why your kids walk away from your faith. Well, if it doesn't mean anything, there's nothing you can do to make it mean anything, you know. And that's what's so interesting about biblical Christianity. For example, you may or may not have ever thought about this, but there's no mandated holidays in Christianity. Zero. There's no you have to celebrate Christmas. There's no you even have to celebrate Easter, Resurrection Sunday. That's what we do every Sunday. You might say the only holiday that we're mandated is to meet together around the Lord's table. That's the holiday. Everything else is man-made to some degree. Now, I enjoy, you know, some holidays, but it's interesting how Christianity is the only religion without any mandated ones. You know, you go to any other religion, and they are mandated. And so it just kind of to show you that God is consistent, because he says in Romans 14, if a holiday means something to you, celebrate it. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. We have freedom with regards to those things. And I know to our Western American mind, it'd be very hard to, you know, to not celebrate Christmas or Easter. And I think we always will, and that's fine. but it's not mandated by God. That's the difference. And that's interesting. Scott?
So the Pharisees are after him right now, supposedly because he healed this man on the Sabbath.
Mhm.
Is that really a problem for them? Was
No.
healing prohibited on the Sabbath?
No.
And what would that have meant back then? Because would that have been, they had, primitive medicine, so would that have somehow been associated with something besides their religion?
I think it was just a cover because they didn't like Jesus.
And that's kind of what I read into it also, but
Yeah.
I'm just curious if.
No, they just, and that's why when they drug him before Pilate, they were trying to throw all these political accusations at Jesus. Like he's going to overthrow Rome. That's what he's plotting, They wanted to get him on a charge, but there was none. And even Pilate was like, this guy's innocent.
Okay.
You're making stuff up. Yeah. And of course, that still happens to this day, right? People who don't like each other politically or whatever, they'll come up with ways to accuse each other and a bunch of hullabaloo. Yep.
And that's the whole point, is just people upset.
Yep.
It's not to win them basically to something, it's get them upset so they'll leave what they're doing, no matter.
Yep. Just put enough pressure on them so they cave. Yep.
So with the Pharisees, when Jesus healed this blind man, part of it had been the fact that he had done something that they weren't able to do. I mean, they were supposed to be the top,
Right.
the leaders of the faith there, and he healed this blind man, and that's not something they can do.
Right. Yeah. And not only could they not do anything for him with regards to his eyes, but they did not do anything for him charitably. What if the Pharisees, which by the way, when they first started, they were a charitable organization, then they became an authoritarian organization that wasn't charitable. That's how most government programs start. But anyway, so the Pharisees, if they had been charitable to this man, if they had helped his family, or they brought him food, or anything they could have done, don't you think this would have been very different?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because he would have been like, well, you guys have always been good to me, so I got nothing against you. And Jesus healed me, so I got nothing against you. And also, if the Pharisees were charitable, don't you think their overall attitude would be different towards Jesus?
Oh, yeah.
Like, here's somebody who helps even more than we can. How awesome is that? Charitable people aren't jealous. Who is jealous? Authority people, authoritarians, having their power threatened. They're the ones that get jealous. So, yeah, that's a good thought, Scott. Yeah, it was just a cover. All right. Well, before we move on to chapter 10, which is a beautiful proverb that Jesus teaches, anybody else have any thoughts, questions, or comments?
Where did the Pharisees come from? You said they started as a charitable organization.
So,
Government, or were they?
no. When Israel came back from Babylonian captivity, which was about 517 BC, okay? So you remember the southern kingdom got captured by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon and got brought in to Babylon. That's the story of like Daniel and that whole group. Well, 70 years later, Ezra and Nehemiah, under God, lead the people of Israel back to Israel. Well, the main reason why they were put in captivity is because they kept worshiping idols and engaging in behaviors and things that were against God, and they finally were punished for it. The Pharisees were established by the Israelites who returned between Malachi and Matthew. Remember how there's a 400-year silent period in your Bible? It's called the intertestamental period. The Pharisees were established during that time to keep the people away from idols. And one way they did that is that anybody who didn't worship idols, they would help. Do you see my point? That was the incentive. So you remember, these people are coming back from captivity. Does anybody own anything? Does anybody have anything? No. And so they would use their spare time to help people get their farm started again, or to help build their house, or, and the deal was, you don't worship idols, you follow the law, we'll help you. Well, eventually they stopped the helping part and they just enforced their own laws.
Somebody had to do that, It's like probably one person had to put their authority in.
Yep, and corrupt the whole thing. And that's what happens with any man-made organization over time. You know, no matter how good the people are who started, it will always deteriorate over time. That's just history. You know, you could create the world's most pure, clean constitution possible, and what's going to happen if man gets hold of it over time?
Right.
Just the way it's going to be. You know? And it's amazing that Jesus has had this earthly kingdom, or this heavenly and earthly kingdom, for 2,000 years, the church, and somehow, some way, there's always been a remnant that's followed it. It's never become completely corrupt and lost to history. So
when it says that the man was of age,
mhm.
I've heard that of age oftentimes is like 12 years old in the Jewish faith, where they decide that, I can't remember where I heard that from.
Well, there's different ages for different things.
Right, so I'm just wondering how old this man was,
Well,
because the question is parents also.
yes. But the reason why I wouldn't think he's that young
I don't think he's that young.
is
either.
because he seems to be by himself.
Right.
And they go and they find the parents later.
And-
So,
And they clearly like put it back on.
yeah, they
him.
distance themselves from him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in the Jewish world, you have 12, 18, and 30. And 30 was the youngest you could be to be a rabbi, to be a Pharisee, to be anybody in like actual authority. And then 18, and this is where we get it from, by the way, in our culture, is we get it from Jewish culture. 18 is when you could conduct your own business independently, you know, all that kind of stuff. 12, you could speak for your family if you were a boy and you had authorization from your father to do so. That was called adoption. Our idea of adoption is different than the Bible idea of adoption. When you read adoption, like in the book of Romans, it talks about adoption a lot, that God adopted us. What that means to the Greek and the Roman and the Hebrew mind is that the Father, the Heavenly Father, has said we can speak for him, that we have his spirit. If you had a boy that didn't have your spirit, then you had two choices. You could keep him as some sort of like second-class child, or you could sell him into slavery. You had that choice.
That's scary.
Yep.
Why would you want to adopt your child?
Because your child speaks for you. Like if he went to the market and he said, I'm going to buy that cow, then his word is as binding as yours. Because remember, children up until very recent times were pretty much all labor. You know, the family unit was really there to support the family. It wasn't about individual people. So if you had a son who didn't contribute to the family labor, you wouldn't adopt him because then he didn't speak for you. And then you had a choice. You could keep him as some kind of second-class kid, basically a charity case, or you could sell him. And that was very, very common.
If the son or whatever child wasn't physically or mentally capable of taking care of himself, did they keep him or did they sell him?
It was up to the father of the family. That was the culture. And the Hebrews, since they were taken over by the Greeks and the Romans, you remember, over time, they had adopted some of their ideas. Not lawful ideas, not Old Testament, but the culture that they lived in. Yeah. And I know this sounds terrible, but if they had like a mentally or physically, deformed child, they were usually not allowed to live past infanthood. They normally killed those children. It was very rare for a child to, like if they came out deformed at birth, they would almost always kill it. Now that's not, again, God's idea. Remember when, Pharaoh wanted to kill all the children born of the Hebrew women, he didn't want that, Pharaoh did. So, pretty brutal.
I'm sure glad we don't live there.
Yeah,
Nothing.
yeah.
But the same thing happens with children.
What you got, Wayne?
Well, yeah.
Well, I just think about that. A law that Minnesota's getting ready to vote on to allow abortion in the third period.
Yep.
And my Amish friend says the time's coming when they'll throw them in the river just like Pharaoh did.
We don't value life. And the Greeks and the Romans, they were all about the military and conquest. They didn't have time for welfare. That's how they dealt with it. They just took care of it right then and there. So, pretty awful. All right. Well, we're almost out of time. But anybody else have any thoughts, questions, comments, rabbit holes? We haven't talked about the moon landing in a while.
No, thanks.
No thanks. Yeah, me either. Alex isn't here to stir the pot, so. Yeah, him and Jonathan are going to start preaching classes on the same week this coming Sunday. So that'll be fun. We'll all be at the Kaimichi together. So Daddy's going to show them how it's done.
You just wait.
I texted that to Alex, and he's like, "I'm not calling you Daddy." Well, I think we'll stop there. Chapter 10 will be waiting for us next week, and we'll have a good time with that. It's one of the most beautiful parts of Scripture. All righty. Well, Virgil, would you close us out?
Our gracious Heavenly Father, we're thankful to be here today. We're thankful for your word. We're thankful for all that Jesus went through. Lay us down, guide and direct us.
Well, if Velda calls, I'll tell her you all said hello.
Yeah.
So,
We miss her.
yep.